Welcome to the People Teaching People podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. Have you ever walked out of a classroom, a workshop, a meeting, or even finished listening to something and thought, okay, but what was the point? Not because it was bad, not because it wasn't thoughtful or well intended, but because there was just so much information, so many details, so many ideas that you couldn't quite name what you were supposed to walk away with. Your head is spinning, your notes are full, and yet if someone asked you what you learned or what actually mattered, you're not totally sure what you'd say. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And honestly, I've been on both sides of that experience. Today, we're going to talk about the big idea, the one thing we hope someone carries with them long after the details fade. This is my first solo episode of 2026, and it feels fitting to start the year by talking about focus, not in a productivity way, but in a clarity way. Because whether we're teaching, facilitating, leading meetings, designing learning experiences, creating content, or just trying to communicate clearly with the people around us, it's very easy to get lost in the details and lose sight of the big idea. And when that happens, learning gets fuzzy, messages get diluted, and people leave unsure of what actually mattered. When I say the big idea, I'm not talking about a buzzword or a catchy title. I'm talking about the core message, the central question being answered, the one thing you want someone to remember if everything else fades. The big idea is the anchor. It's the through line. It's the thing that gives meaning to all the details, not the other way around. Because details without a big idea feel overwhelming. But details in service of a big idea feel purposeful. I've had moments both as a learner and as a facilitator where I realized after the fact that we covered a lot but didn't land anything. I remember sitting in sessions where the slides were packed, the examples were plentiful, the activities were thoughtful, and yet when I tried to explain the session to someone later, I struggled. Not because the presenter didn't know their stuff, but because I couldn't name the point. And I've caught myself doing the same thing, wanting to share everything I know, everything that might be helpful, everything that could possibly add value, and accidentally burying the thing that mattered the most. That's often where good intentions and unclear outcomes collide. When we don't name the big idea clearly, learners don't know where to focus their attention. Participants aren't sure what to prioritize. People leave unsure of what to do next. But when the big idea is clear, learning sticks. Conversations have direction, decisions feel easier, action feels more possible. Clarity isn't about simplifying things to the point of losing nuance. It's about helping people know what to hold on to. This isn't just about classrooms or workshops. The big idea matters in a staff meeting, in a strategy session, in a social media post, a podcast episode, an email, a conversation with a client or colleague. Anytime you're communicating, teaching, or guiding, you're shaping a learning experience. And the question underneath all of it is the same. What do I want someone to walk away with? Here are a few strategies I use and return to often to help keep the big idea front and center. Number one, name it early, even if it feels obvious. Sometimes we assume the big idea is clear because it's clear to us, but naming it explicitly helps others orient themselves. You might say, by the end of this, I want you to walk away with, or the question we're really exploring today is, if there's one thing to remember, it's this. That framing matters more than we think. Number 2, use the big idea as a filter. When you're planning or preparing, ask, does this example serve the big idea? Does this activity deepen understanding or just add more? Is this detail helping or distracting? Not everything needs to make the cut. Clarity often comes from what we choose not to include. Number 3, return to it often. Repeating the big idea doesn't dilute it, it reinforces it. You can circle back by saying, this connects back to our main idea because, or here's how this fits into the bigger picture. People appreciate help seeing the connections. Here's some quick big idea checks to ask yourself. These are questions I tend to keep top of mind when I'm trying to keep the big idea in mind. If someone remembered only one thing, what would I want it to be? Could I summarize the point of this in 1 or 2 sentences? What question am I actually trying to answer? If I removed half the content, would the message still land? What action or shift do I hope this creates? If these feel hard to answer, it's often a sign that the big idea needs more clarity and not more content. I want to zoom out for a moment because this idea of focus and clarity connects deeply to something I've done for the past 7 years. At the start of each year, I choose one word to guide how I show up. So it's not a goal, it's not a resolution, but just a big idea, a lens for decisions, energy, and attention. So over the years, my words have been intention, connection, alignment, curiosity, nurture, cultivate. Each one shaped how I said yes. And just as importantly, how I said no. For this year, for 2026, my word is do. And when I shared this on Instagram, I wrote this. I can spend a lot of time thinking about doing the right thing, planning it, refining it, editing it, and thinking about it some more. But clarity doesn't always come before action. Often it comes from it. Doing is how we learn. Doing is how things take shape. Doing is how we stop overthinking and start moving. Here's to small steps, imperfect starts, and learning along the way. Do is my big idea for the year. When I'm unsure, I come back to it. When I'm stuck in planning, I come back to it. When I'm waiting for things to feel perfect, I come back to it. It helps me to ask, what's the next small step? What would action look like here? What am I learning by doing? And there's another layer to this for me that feels important to share. I was diagnosed with ADHD inattentive type in my 40s. And interestingly, it didn't happen because I was seeking a diagnosis for myself. It happened while we were going through the process for one of our kiddos, which I've since learned is actually pretty common. So looking back, it explained so much. For most of my life, I've been someone who can get completely immersed in the details. I notice everything. I think deeply. I make all the connections. But I've also spent a lot of time feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or unsure, especially in learning environments because I couldn't always tell what the point was. I remember leaving classes and thinking, I really worked hard in there. I really tried to pay attention, but what did I actually learn? My notes were full and my brain was tired, and yet that big idea never quite landed. At the time, I didn't have language for that experience. I just knew it felt exhausting, like swimming in information without a clear place to rest. Understanding how my brain works helped me make sense of that pattern. But more importantly, it helped me realize how essential clarity is, not just for me, but for so many people. Because when that big idea isn't named, it's incredibly easy to get lost in the details. And when you are someone who naturally sees all the details, that can feel overwhelming instead of supportive. Over time, I've had to put strategies in place for myself and in my work to help the big idea stand out. Things like naming it explicitly, returning to it often, using it as a filter for what matters and what can wait. Not because details don't matter, they do, but because without a clear big idea, they don't really have anywhere to land. And honestly, that lived experience is a big part of why I care so much about how learning is designed and communicated. Because clarity isn't about watering it down, it's about making learning accessible, grounding, and human. Whether you're designing learning experiences, leading teams, creating content, or simply trying to communicate more clearly, the question remains, what's the big idea? What's the one thing you want someone to carry with them? What's the anchor for all the details? What's guiding your choices? When we're clear on that, everything else has a place. As you move through your week, I'll leave you with this to reflect on. Where might a clearer big idea help you to simplify, focus, or move forward, not by doing less, but by being more intentional about what matters most? Thank you for joining me today on the People Teaching People podcast. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to send me an email or reach out on social media. And if you think someone else could benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Thank you for listening. Let's keep learning together by staying clear on the big idea and letting it more clearly guide what comes next.